Most of us approach arguments completely backward. We think an argument is a battle between two sets of facts. You have your facts, and the other person has their facts. You believe that if you can just push your facts hard enough, or say them loudly enough, or phrase them perfectly enough, the other person will suddenly stop, look at you, and say, "You are right. I was wrong. Thank you for enlightening me." But this almost never happens. Instead, when you push, they push back. You get heated. They get defensive. The logic disappears, and suddenly you aren't arguing about the topic anymore. You are arguing about tone, or past mistakes, or character. You walk away exhausted, and nobody changes their mind. If you want to stop this cycle, you have to stop looking at arguments as a clash of facts. You have to start looking at them as a clash of biology and perception. There is a method to handle this. It comes from ancient Greek philosophy, specifically the Stoic tradition, but we are going to look at it through the lens of modern psychology. This isn't about being smarter than everyone else. It is about understanding the mechanical process that happens in your brain when you feel contradicted, and learning how to interrupt that process before it turns into anger. If you can master this, you don't just win the argument by remaining calm. You actually allow the truth to surface, which is the only way anyone's mind ever actually changes. Here is how it works, step by step. Part 1. The anatomy of the trigger. To understand the solution, we first have to understand the problem. Why do you get angry when someone disagrees with you? It feels like you get angry because they are being stupid, or stubborn, or rude. But that is not the cause. That is the trigger. The cause is internal. When you hold a belief, whether it's about politics, or how to load the dishwasher, or a strategy at work, your brain does not store that belief in a separate box called facts. It weaves that belief into your model of reality. It becomes part of how you predict the world works. The brain is, fundamentally, a prediction machine. It constantly guesses what will happen next so it can keep you safe. When you believe X is true, your brain relies on that stability. So, when someone stands in front of you and says, "No, X is false," your brain does not treat this as an interesting piece of data. It treats it as a prediction error. It treats it as a threat to your model of reality. Evolutionarily, being wrong was dangerous. If you were wrong about where the food was, or wrong about the social hierarchy of the tribe, you could die or be outcast. So, we evolved a biological defense mechanism against being contradicted. When the contradiction hits, your amygdala, the threat detection center of your brain, activates. It hijacks the system. It releases cortisol and adrenaline. This happens milliseconds before you are even consciously aware of the argument. This is why you feel the heat in your chest. This is why your voice raises. Your body is preparing for a fight. It is treating a verbal disagreement exactly the same way it would treat a physical attack. Once this chemical dump happens, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, empathy, and reasoning, essentially goes offline. You literally become less intelligent. You lose the ability to see nuance. You enter binary thinking. I am good/right, they are bad/wrong. This is the trap. You cannot win an argument in this state because you aren't actually thinking, you are reacting. And the other person is reacting to your reaction. It is a loop of mutual defense. The ancient Greeks, particularly Epictetus, identified this thousands of years before we had brain scans. Epictetus said, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgment of things." This is the core secret. We merge the event, what they said, with the judgment, what it implies about us. To win, you must surgically separate them. Part 2. The gap between perception and reality. Let's slow this down. Usually the process looks like this. Event. Someone says, "That's a stupid idea." Your reaction. You get angry. It feels instantaneous. The anger comes from the story you told yourself about the words, not the words themselves. The words are just sound waves vibrating in the air. The meaning is generated by you. The secret to winning is claiming the territory in that middle step. You have to widen the gap between the event and the judgment. Let's look at a concrete example to make it a bit more real. The domestic argument. Imagine you come home after a long day. You walk into the kitchen and you see a pile of dirty dishes in the sink that your partner promised to wash. The automatic path. You see the dishes. Your brain instantly runs a pattern match. It connects dishes to broken promise. Then it connects broken promise to lack of care. Your internal monologue says, "They didn't do the dishes because they don't value my time. They expect me to be the servant." That is the judgment. Because you believe this judgment is a fact, you feel resentment. You walk into the living room and say, "Why are you so lazy?" Your partner, who might have just forgotten or been busy, feels attacked. They fight back. Now you are arguing about their character, lazy, rather than the reality, the dishes. You lose. The Greek method path. You walk in. You see the dishes. You feel the initial spike of irritation. But instead of letting the judgment attach to the event, you stop. You look at the impression. The raw data is, there are ceramic plates in a metal sink. That is the only absolute truth. Everything else, they don't respect me, they are lazy, is a hypothesis. It is a story you are writing. You acknowledge the dishes exist. You refuse to assent to the story that this is a personal attack. Because you stripped away the judgment, you don't feel the adrenaline spike. You remain calm. You can now walk into the living room and say, "Hey, I noticed the dishes are still there. What happened?" Do you see the difference? In the second scenario, you are inviting an explanation. In the first, you are inviting a war. By controlling your internal narrative, you change the entire trajectory of the interaction. Part 3. Redefining winning. Now you might be thinking, staying calm is nice, but I want to prove I'm right. How does this help me win? We have to redefine winning. Most people think winning means dominating. They think it means the other person shuts up and looks defeated. But that isn't winning. That is just silencing. If you silence someone, they still believe they are right. They just hate you now. Real winning is dialectic. This is the Socratic method. Winning means you and the other person act as partners in search of the truth. If you are right, winning means guiding the other person to see that truth for themselves, without triggering their ego defense. You cannot force a new idea into someone's brain if their drawbridge is up. Anger pulls the drawbridge up. Safety lowers it. When you remove your own anger, you stop triggering their mirror neurons. If you are calm, it is physically difficult for them to stay screaming angry. It feels awkward. They will eventually match your energy. Once the energy is down, you shift from assertion to inquiry. Example 2. The work, political debate. Let's say you are in a meeting. You propose a new strategy for a project. A colleague interrupts and says, "That will never work. It's too expensive and we tried it 5 years ago." The automatic path. Your ego screams. You hear, "You are incompetent." You interrupt back. "No, it's not. You aren't looking at the new data. You're just stuck in the past." Now it's an ego battle. He has to defend his seniority. You have to defend your intelligence. Nobody is talking about the cost anymore. The Greek method path. He says, "It's too expensive." You feel the spike. You pause. You separate the data from the judgment. The data is, he has a concern about money and history. You do not view him as an enemy. You view him as a barrier to the truth that needs to be dismantled. You say, "I see. You're worried about the budget. Can you walk me through how you're calculating the cost? I want to make sure I didn't miss something." This is the ultimate power move. You validated him. "I see." You asked a question instead of making a statement. You positioned yourself as humble. "I want to make sure I didn't miss something." Now, he has to explain his logic. He has to use his prefrontal cortex. If his logic is flawed, he will likely discover the error himself while trying to explain it to you. If he is right, you learn something and avoid a mistake. In either case, the conflict is gone. You are now collaborating. That is how you win. You win by turning an opponent into a partner. Part 4. The step-by-step method. How do you actually do this today? It is hard because it goes against your biology. You need a drill. Here is the 3-step process. Step 1. The physiological check. You cannot control your mind if your body is in fight or flight mode. You need to catch the anger early. Watch for the physical signs: a tightening in the stomach, a heat in the face, clenching jaws. The moment you feel this, you must set a hard rule. Do not speak. If you speak now, you will lose. The chemistry is too strong. Take one long breath. This isn't spiritual woo-woo. It is mechanics. A slow exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the adrenaline. It buys you the 3 seconds you need to get your brain back online. Step 2. The cognitive separation. Once you have paused, ask yourself one question. What is the event, and what is my judgment? Strip the adjectives. He is being a jerk is a judgment. He raised his voice is the event. She is ignoring me is a judgment. She is looking at her phone is the event. Force your brain to see the raw data. This breaks the emotional loop because you can't be furious at raw data. You can only be furious at the story. Step 3. Curious inquiry. Now that you are cool, engage the other person with curiosity, not correction. Assume they have a reason for what they are saying. It might be a bad reason, but it is a reason. Your goal is to find that reason. Use phrases like, "What leads you to that conclusion? Help me understand. It sounds like you're saying X. Is that right?" By asking them to explain, you force them to move from emotional shouting to logical processing. You are literally helping them turn their own brain back on. So, this method is not easy. Let's be honest, it requires humility. It requires you to consciously give up that immediate electric satisfaction you get from snapping back at someone. It requires you to take your ego, the part that screams, "I am the smart one here," and tell it to sit down for a minute. But consider what you are sacrificing that for. You are not sacrificing your rightness. You are sacrificing your slavery to the immediate toxic urge. You are giving up the chance to be a puppet of your own worst impulses. Think back over the last few arguments you've had. How many of them actually resulted in a positive change, a solution, a moment of understanding? And how many just left you exhausted, bitter, and only deepened the divide between you and the other person? Anger doesn't solve a problem. It only creates a bigger one. It turns a potential partner into a definite enemy. When we react purely on impulse, we become predictable. We are just animals barking at other animals, letting a survival mechanism from the Stone Age run our modern lives. The ancient secret is not a magic word or a clever retort. It is the simple, life-altering refusal to be a slave to that impulse. It's the realization that no one, absolutely no one, can make you angry without your personal internal consent. They can yell, they can insult, they can be completely wrong, but those are just sounds hitting your ear. You are the one who must pick up the emotional stamp that says, "This is an attack," and sign the internal paperwork that turns those sounds into fury. If you simply refuse to stamp that paperwork, you keep your control. You keep your intelligence. In a world where everyone else is trapped in a knee-jerk, predictable reaction loop, the person who remains calm is the one who holds the power. That is the freedom the Stoics promised. That is the truest way to win. So, this method is not easy. Let's be honest, it requires humility. It requires you to consciously give up that immediate electric satisfaction you get from snapping back at someone. It requires you to take your ego, the part that screams, "I am the smart one here," and tell it to sit down for a minute. But consider what you are sacrificing that for. You are not sacrificing your rightness. You are sacrificing your slavery. Think back over the last few arguments you've had. How many of them actually resulted in a positive change, a solution, a moment of understanding? And how many just left you exhausted, bitter, and only deepened the divide between you and the other person?
Anger doesn't solve a problem. It only creates a bigger one. It turns a potential partner into a definite enemy. When we react purely on impulse, we become predictable. We are just animals barking at other animals, letting a survival mechanism from the Stone Age run our modern lives. The ancient secret is not a magic word or a clever retort. It is the simple, life-altering refusal to be a slave to that impulse. It's the realization that no one, absolutely no one, can make you angry without your personal, internal consent. They can yell. They can insult. They can be completely wrong. But those are just sounds hitting your ear. You are the one who must pick up the emotional stamp that says, "This is an attack," and sign the internal paperwork that turns those sounds into fury. If you simply refuse to stamp that paperwork, you keep your control. You keep your intelligence. And in a world where everyone else is trapped in a knee-jerk, predictable reaction loop, the person who remains calm, the person who is truly thinking, is the one who holds the power. That is the freedom the Stoics promised, and it's the truest way to win